Mr. Brooks, baby.
What up, Gooch?
You don't remember back in the days that?
Yeah, I remember back in the days,
No.
man.
I'm talking about, do you really remember that shit?
Yeah, nigga, I told you I did. What you remember?
Hey, I remember when niggas used to get thrown off the Buffalo boat. I remember when Kane dropped raw and the country got swung out on dope. I remember when Awesome Dre said you cannot hold me back. I remember when House Shoes learned how to make his first track. I remember when the rap game had an overflow of variety. I remember when my friend made millions and he still didn't hire me. I remember when the Cobra Line tried to overtake G.I. Joe. I remember when the fame got started. Now it's cool to be a hoe.
I remember nanny goats and gazelles make you feel like you had some change. I remember back then, nowadays James Anthony and Cardi frames. I remember summertime free lunches for parents who had nothing. Do you remember? Get your ass in the house when the street lights come on. I remember when, this is not Memorex, was the rap zone. I remember when Mason in the morning was the Tom Joyner morning show. I remember when gas was under $1 for a gallon. I remember when they say hip hop on dial, now look what happened.
Do you remember?